Welcome to the Fruity Knitting Podcast, Episode 9. We have got a lot on the show today, a lot of interesting things and some very different things, I think. Andrea will be taking a look at Marie Wallen's book, Springtime, so showing you the patterns on that in that book. We are taking a walk in the German woods again, and we meet some wildlife, which is really fun. We have our next guest on Knitters of the World, and today our Knitter of the World is coming from the Netherlands, but based in UK, and has some very interesting things to show us. And you're going to be talking a little bit more about that area, and it is actually about vintage knitting is what we're going to be seeing today. I think it's really nice, and another lovely guest that we've got coming. Yeah. So what else do we have? We've got a little bit of Italy in today's show. Andrea went off to a wedding with Madeline last week, and so there's just a short bit of footage of that, and checking our notes.
And we've also, getting back to the vintage knitting, we've got our very controversial guest, which you will get to meet from the past.
The controversial knitters from history.
Yes.
So that's all coming up.
And all amongst our weekly progress on our knitting, which we enjoy showing you.
So we're going to start with...
What?
Bring and brag.
Yes, it features today, which is great. Okay.
It's your turn, Andrea, so show us what you've finished.
So I am sure you were all expecting me to finish this because I was almost finished it last episode. And this is the Lovage by Marie Wallen. It's been a really fun knit. I've really enjoyed knitting it. It's for my daughter Madeline, and I will show you some pictures. I took some photos of her yesterday in it. She loves it. It fits her really well. What I want to say is I think it's a pretty easy Fair Isle garment. So if you are wanting to get into Fair Isle, this is a beautiful garment to get in to do. The reason why it's easy is you're doing it in the round, so it's knitted in the round to the body. The body is knitted in the round up to the armholes. And what?
I'm just going to interrupt you quickly.
Yes.
Normally we don't sit with our phones on, but there's a little message there.
Ah, thank goodness. That's great. We've been sitting here really worried because our daughter seemed to be missing. She was meant to be off at a modelling job, and the photographer phoned and the agency phoned, and we knew she'd left and she wasn't answering her phone. Oh, that's great. You're going to have a relaxed podcast now. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, so I will, while Andrew is answering that, I feel so much happier. Good. I will continue on with this. So there'll be some photos here of Madeline in her lovely new sweater. I am so relieved. I'm trying to find which is this is the front and that's the back. So what I think is really great about this pattern is that each panel of Fair Isle is really easy to memorise. It's there's not long sections where you have to carry floats, and it's very symmetrical, as in it mirrors itself, so that means it's very easy to memorise. So it's a great pattern for a first-time Fair Isle garment. As I was saying, I think before we got that great phone call, was that you knit the body up to the arms in the round, you do the sleeves in the round to the armholes, and then you join it together for the yoke. So it's a very easy construction to knit Fair Isle in. I also wanted to turn it inside out and show you. You might have seen that I've just put out a tutorial on the Babel hat where I show you how to do the two-handed Fair Isle technique that I use, that I learnt from the Philosopher's Wool, and how to weave in the ends as you go, weave in the floats, but also weave in new yarns and weave out old yarns. So in the end, you've got no ends to weave in. All you have to do is just chop off things. So this is the inside of my ferrule project. And if you can see there's no long floats, which I think is wonderful because you can run your hands, and it's fantastic if you're going to do anything ferrule for a child, because you can run your hands all through it. You're never going to catch anything on it. It's very, very neat and tidy, and it has a woven look on the back. So yeah, so I thoroughly enjoyed doing this project. It is finished for now, but the pattern actually has this crochet panel.
That's right.
From the cuff up to here. And I had this idea that I would just, because I can't crochet at all. I mean, I can crochet around a neckline to pull it in tight, but I didn't know how to hold a crochet needle properly or anything like that. So I checked out Very Pink, and she's got some really good starter stitches and shows you how to hold the crochet hook, which I did. And so I thought, oh, I'll just take this pattern and learn to crochet on this pattern. And that would be the equivalent of learning to knit
on a pair of socks on magic loop, 2 at a time.
Actually, even harder.
No.
I think it would be like learning to knitting a lace shawl with lace weight yarn, because you have to use a 2.5 millimeter crochet hook, right? And this wool is like hand spun. It's got thin and thick bits. So it's when you start off.
Can we put up the what's your excuse?
Okay.
Banner here. What's your excuse? I haven't done the crochet because. So this is not actually finished.
Well, yes, it is. It's finished for now. It's finished for now. I am going to do this because I have to say I was never, ever inspired to knit crochet in the past, because I grew up in the 80s and the only crochet things that I saw I thought were hideous. They were thick, violent colours, stiff material in ugly shapes. And I don't want to offend any crochet people because that was just my experience of it. But then when I saw Marie Wallen's decorative panels on her garments from crochet, I thought that is so beautiful. I did know crochet as in doilies and tablecloths, which is really fine and beautiful, but nothing for a garment that I'd want to wear. But so seeing her crochet has really inspired me to learn. But getting back to me learning, this I'm a complete beginner and I have to learn. There's all of these stitches. There's double crochet and triple, double treble and half treble and treble. So I have to actually learn all of these stitches. And then I thought what I would do, and you start off with a chain, because your chain in crochet is a bit like your cast on row.
Yeah.
But I tried it straight away in this wool, and it was so tiny. I couldn't even stick my hook through. You know, I thought, oh my God, this is just too difficult. So I'm going to have to knit this crochet or practice this crochet panel in a really thick yarn and a really thick hook, and then gradually get lower and lower in my hook and my yarn until I knit or crochet something that's neat enough, and I'll put it on here. So I'll keep you posted.
Tell me, how do you get it onto the jumper?
I would just sew it on.
Okay, so you sort of do it as a separate bit,
Yeah.
and then you attach it to the jumper. It's not like it's.
But I so want to do it because it
integrated
really makes the garments just so extra special. So I do see it's a skill I need to learn. So, but I have had some wonderful crochet people offer to help me. Even one lovely lady in Germany offered to make it for me. But I thought, oh, that's very tempting. But then I thought, no, I've got to do it myself.
So it was a humbling experience, was it?
Yes, a humbling experience.
Brought you down a notch or two.
It did. A hook or two.
A hook or two.
Okay, so now we're under construction.
These are my socks, and
you're on DPNs.
I'm on DPNs. Yeah, I'm just DPNing away here, and I've gone ahead, and then Andrea's told me, oh, you should have gone back to the magic loop, because now I'm going to have to count my rows, because it's important that your socks have the same length feet, which is what we're working on now. All right, so here we are, top of the socky bit, heel here. So there's my heel flap, there's my gusset.
That's it.
And all these little decreasy bits, and it went pretty well. Picking up the stitches was a little bit scary.
But easier.
But then
you did the slip stitches this time.
Yeah, we did the slip
recommended
stitches.
And you also did the slip stitch pattern on the heel flap last time you did.
Yeah, I mentioned that last time. That was where I was sitting there thinking I'd rather be sitting at the dentist than doing this.
But you know what I never thought of, and I'm not a sock knitter, so I don't know the ins and outs of socks, but the reason why you do that is it makes it extra thick, because that's where you're likely to wear a hole in your sock. So It's an excellent thing to have
they're
there.
excellent socks they're going to be.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and I got through all of that. That was pretty painful, especially this what I talked about last week, the slip stitches. That was really bad. But after that, it's really easy, and I had to wait while Andrea was away. I couldn't do the picking up stitches on my own. There was no chance of trying that without supervision, adult supervision. So
Well, I only had to show you again to remind you to go through both loops.
There's something pretty interesting.
That's just
That's just something or other. But now that I'm past all that, it's whizzing along, and I'm just staying on these DPNs, and I'll count the rows so that they're the same length, since that's so important.
Well, it is.
I have figured the next pair of socks. I thought, I've actually had two ideas for designs, two pattern designs, right?
He's always threatening to bring out pattern designs.
Just wait for it. It's like maturing and bubbling over in my mind, and it's going to be great.
I'm going to move on to my next project.
All right.
And my next project is another Marie Wallen. Yes, because
Are we sponsored by Marie Wallen?
No, we're not. We're not sponsored. We've got a lot going on this episode, so we have to move on.
Yeah.
So in springtime, she brought out her book, Springtime, and it is a gorgeous collection. So I'm going to review that for you quickly today. But I'm doing the one on the cover, and that's Amaryllis. And it is such a beautiful design. While I talk about it, I'll put some photos down of it so you can see. So I'm halfway through a row here, which is a little unfortunate. But this is the back panel, and oops. So how the design is constructed, it's a combination of Fair Isle and Intarsia. So you have Fair Isle around the band and around the band of the cuffs, and then on the front pieces you've got two Intarsia motifs which really look like Eastern European folk motives, you know.
Don't look at me, I'm not here.
You're not here, that's right. He's covered. Okay. So, which are really, really beautiful. So I will show some photos of my knitting. I took some yesterday so you can see close up. So this underneath is this lovely little, either a tree or a sort of a leafy design. And then you've got a border. And then you've got this, what I think looks like a Latvian peasant folk motif here. And this section is done in Intarsia. So Intarsia, if you don't know the difference between Intarsia and Fair Isle, and I'll give you a quick explanation, and I really didn't know, and I'll talk about this in another from the archive section, but not today, but I actually didn't know I was doing Intarsia in a pattern, and I was doing it, and I was doing it all wrong. So if I only knew it was Intarsia, I would have looked it up and I would have done it right. But Intarsia, as opposed to Fair Isle, so Fair Isle, you're working with usually two colours, or stranded knitting, it can be more than two colours, and you carry so you've got your working yarn and you use that on the stitches that you need to, and then the other colour is carried behind, and you can see that here, is carried behind in floats. I weave my floats in, so my floats aren't very long, until you use that colour. So in every row you've got both colours being carried through, and that actually has a thicker fabric because you've got two yarns of wool being carried the whole way through. Intarsia is where you have colour work, but you've got blocks of colours. So typically if you had a picture or squares or triangles or argyle, you know, like on argyle jumpers or socks, that's typically in Intarsia. And so you don't carry the colour along the row. You have a whole lot of different colours, either on a ball or long strands or wound up into bobbins, and you knit along. So you knit along in colour A, and then you get to the section where you have to knit colour B, and you've got that bobbin of that colour hanging down, and so you twist the yarns around each other so there's no hole. You knit in colour B, and then you might have a colour C, so you get that bobbin, which is normally just hanging down. You twist the yarns around so that they stick together. In my knitting, I didn't do that, and the thing kept falling out. I couldn't figure what's going on here, but that's another story for another episode. Okay, so that's Intarsia. So this little panel here on the front, and you've got one on the right side and one on the left side, and this one is my right side panel. It's done in Intarsia. So normally, I'll hold it against myself here, you would have, but it's really pretty close to Fair Isle. You've got these sections here, which there's no point carrying the green colour to the end of the row because you just carry it and back again. So you just use the Intarsia for this section here. But what you do, and you can see you start off in the first row, you've only got one stitch right in the middle. So you would put your green wool here and start it there. And then what I do is in the second row, I have to start quite a way from my original green. I weave the float in as I go, so that it's right at the point that I need to use it on the row coming back. Okay, so when I turn this around, you can see it looks the same. The middle bit is woven like Fair Isle, but you don't have any of the green on either side. I will do a tutorial on this so you can see. Now this is done in the flat and seamed, which is a rather tricky way to Fair Isle, but I have since learned, I learned to do that on Andrew's jumper Ashy, which is the tartan jumper that you see always at the beginning of every episode. And so I learned to weave my ends in as I go on the purl side, just like I do on the knit side. And it's not that tricky. The hardest thing about knitting or purling Fair Isle is that you don't have the pattern, you can't see the pattern so clearly right underneath you to be able to read it, because that's the side, it's the wrong side, and that's the side that you're carrying your yarns across, so you can't see your stitches as clearly. But apart from that, it's all right. And I was quite pleased to have little sections to keep what I'd learned in my memory, so I don't forget that technique of purling Fair Isle. So I will also show you how to do that in a tutorial. Yeah. So that's this great piece. I want to say something about the colours. I use the colours that Marie used, firstly because green is my absolute favourite colour, and I love that. But what's really interesting is this is avocado. Oh, and it's done in the Rowan felted tweed, which is a
50% merino.
It's 50%
25%
merino.
alpaca. 25%
viscose. Well done.
Yeah, which I think in English one would say is viscose.
Viscose.
Or in Australian say viscose.
Viscose.
Yeah.
I keep saying it the German way.
Yeah.
Okay, so it comes in a huge range of rustic colours, so it is brilliant for Fair Isle because you get a great choice of colours, and they're all tweedy, and I think they're really beautiful colours. So this colour is quite a bright, warm green, so it has a golden undertone to it, and she's paired it with this contrast colour, which has, this one's called avocado, this one's called clay, which has this cool blue undertone to it. And if you want to learn about colours, it's really great to look closely at what really good designers do, because you can learn a lot. If I was doing this for myself, I would have paired this probably with just another warm, creamy colour, or even a very, very light, soft beige. But I would never have thought to put it with this, because this has a blue undertone to it, and this has a golden undertone to it, which means that they're opposite. And so when you do put them together, it makes them this even look more golden and this look even more cooler, and it exaggerates the difference and makes it a starker contrast, and it makes it brighter or fresher. And that's really cool. And it reminds me of a Splice ice cream. I don't know if you know Splice ice creams, but in Australia, they're lime green on the outside and creamy inside, and they're fantastic on a hot day.
Yeah, if anyone in Australia is watching, you could send us one or two.
Or eat one and enjoy it for us.
Yeah, all right. Eat one and tell us how it was. We're going to go for a bit of a walk in the woods, and we're going to a beautiful chapel. It's St. Joost Capella, so St. Joost Chapel, and St. Joost is the patron saint of pilgrims. So we're doing a little bit of a pilgrimage through the woods. We've got music. We always put a bit of music. Andrea is going to be singing. Andrea has had a career as a singer and has sung in all these beautiful tiny chapels and churches all around Germany. Germany is really good if you're after a beautiful tiny church.
Yeah.
And Andrea, amongst some other songs, Andrea does have a full repertoire of Ave Marias. Okay, and if you're having a churchy ceremony, then an Ave Maria is often good. So today's Ave Maria is by Caccini.
It's actually my favourite. Caccini's Ave Maria
favourite.
Is totally my favourite Ave Maria.
It probably is my favourite too, but I'd have to check your repertoire again to be absolutely sure. And you're being accompanied on harp by the harpist from the Frankfurt Opera?
Yes.
Yeah, so enjoy this. We'll be back in a few moments.
So we're back. I hope you enjoyed that. And now I'm going to continue on with this review of the Springtime book. So there's 8 designs in here, and they're all using the Rowan felted tweed. And it says it's a trans-seasonal collection, but I would actually use all of these or wear all of these designs in winter as well. They are really soft, beautiful, light colours, muted colours, which are perfect for spring, but I often find in winter you really need bright light colours as well, just to cheer you up, especially in the Northern Hemisphere. So I'm going to just go through the designs quickly, tell you a little bit about how they're constructed, and I'll just put some pictures here, over Andrea again, so you can see what I'm talking about. So the first one we're going to start with is Lily. Lily is a really beautiful design. It's got half-length sleeves, so just above the elbows, and it has a beautiful crocheted neckline. It's knitted straight up, so it's knitted in the flat, straight up to the armholes, and then it's got set-in sleeves. It's a 3 dots, so it's a little bit tricky. That you've got this Fair Isle pattern, which is, the pattern writes it as being knitted in the flat, but I think you could actually change it to be knitted in the round up to the armholes, knit the sleeves in the round up to the armholes, and then knit the front and the back and the sleeve caps separately, so back and forth into knit, pearl. So that way you're only purling the top bit. You would have to be careful that your gauge stayed the same, so you'd have to keep checking that. That way also you would avoid steeking the armholes, which can give you a slightly thicker seam. But I think it's a totally stunning design. I've seen the colours used in real life, and they are actually more bluey and cooler colours than what the picture shows. So it's really muted pinks and purples and blues, and even the green is not so green as it looks in the picture. It's more of a grey green, but it's a totally stunning design. And the next one is Petal, and Petal is a really gorgeous fine cabled or textured cardigan. It has a very delicate cable looking pattern on it, but you don't use a cable needle, and that's because you're only ever moving one stitch at a time. So the cables are created with a twisted stitch pattern. And that's what I did, if you remember, on my Norbury cardigan, which I finished, that had the cable panels going up on the yoke and on the sleeve. So there was no cable needle used for that. It's just twisting the stitch, 2 stitches, either to the right or to the left. And that gives you that really delicate cabled look. So this one is just got 2 dots, so it's for an average knitter. That's also knitted in the flat with set-in sleeves. And for a non-Fair Isle project, that's my favourite way to knit. I really love set-in sleeves. I think they fit so beautifully. But we'll have more to say on that later. So Daffodil is the next one, and Daffodil is a lovely lacy design. It's a combination of lace and cables. So you have a lace panel down the front, and either side of that you have a very soft, delicate cable pattern, which again is not done with a cable needle, it's just twisted stitch. And Marie does very clear instructions of how to do that, and it's really an easy stitch to do. So you've got that delicate cable pattern on either side of the lace, and then you've got a thicker braid, and that's a true cable, and you use a cable needle for that. Although I would really advise you to learn to knit cables without a cable needle. I only learned this a couple of years ago, and it just makes your life so much easier.
People have asked you for a tutorial, dolls.
And I have done one. If you remember my windy scarf that I knitted by Martin Story, that is a tutorial, and I've showed you how to knit with a cable needle, so if you've never done cables, and without a cable needle. But I have to find time to edit it and make it into a tutorial, and that takes quite a few hours. It's sitting, waiting.
All right.
It's in the wings. Getting back to Daffodil, which is, again, that's a beautiful, that's in this colour here, the avocado, which is probably my favourite colour. That's knitted straight up, which actually, it's a 3-dot pattern, so Marie has said it's for the experienced knitter, but I actually think it looks pretty easy. The reason being is you're knitting straight up, so you have no shaping for the armhole. And when you've got lacy patterns or cable patterns, shaping the armhole for the decreases can make it more difficult to make sure that the pattern still makes sense and you've got the right amount of stitches on each row. But you don't have any of that with this because it's knitted straight up and it's just a soft dropped shoulder. So I don't think it looks that hard at all, actually. So that's Daffodil. And the next one, Dahlia, that's a more simple pattern. That's a 2-dot pattern. So it's a good one to try out Intarsia. You've just got this Intarsia pattern, which I think, again, looks like a Eastern European folk motif. You've got one on the chest and the same one in the same size on the upper sleeves of, so the sleeves go down to the elbows and you've got one on each side. So you're doing the same pattern 3 times. What's really gorgeous about this design is that you've got 4 little lace panels on each corner of the front and back. And this is done in the flat. Yep, so this is done in the flat and seamed. Moving on, the next one, Rosie. Rosie is totally gorgeous. It's a really long tunic style jumper with 3/4 length sleeves. It uses the felted tweed as the background, and the colour that they've used is this colour here that I've used, and that's the clay. So it's this sort of soft grey blue cool shade. And then it's got a little bit of waist shaping, and then you've got a lovely big rose Intarsia motif on the chest and little rose Intarsia motifs along the hem of the tunic and one each on the upper sleeves. So, and it's a set-in sleeve construction as well, and that's also done in the flat. So what is really gorgeous about this is she's used the
Kid Silk Haze.
Kid Silk Haze, you know it better than I do, which is a blend of 75% kid mohair and 25% silk. But what this does is that it means you've got the contrast rose Intarsia motif in this sort of halo, slightly fuzzy because of the mohair feeling. It's soft and a bit fluffy and in brilliant colours, and it really stands out against the soft tweedy background. So I think that's a really clever use of different yarns. And the next one, Fleur. Okay, Fleur is a 2-dot one, and I think this is an easy first Fair Isle jumper. It's the reason why it's easy is if you have a look at it, each panel of Fair Isle is very small and it would be very, very easy to memorise. It's also in quite a large, loose, boxy drop shoulder silhouette. So but it's short in the waist, so it still looks modern. So it goes straight up. That also means it's very easy to knit. The way she's written it, she's done it flat, and so the pattern's written flat and seamed, but this is so easy to change to knit into the round. So you could, and to steek, and I would steek this one because it's loose fitting, so if the seams are a little bit thicker, that's not a problem. And I seriously suggest to you, it all sounds complicated, steeking and changing patterns, and for a long time I never would change any pattern. I was quite scared of it, but it's really just a lack of knowledge. As soon as you've got the knowledge, it's not rocket science. It's very easy to do. So I would suggest go out and get the Alice Darmore Fair Isle Knitting book, because not only does it teach you great techniques and goes all into a whole lot of different charts that you could use if you're making up your own designs, it shows you the basic techniques of how to steek. And so you would be able to take a garment like Fleur, if you wanted to, and change it very easily to be knitted in the round and steeked. It's got all the information you need to do that. And I think by knitting it in the round, it just makes it really easy. And then you've got the sleeves, which you join on as well. And she has this really lovely crocheted panel, which I think just on the shoulders, which really makes it another reason I have to learn to crochet. And the final one is Blossom, and I'm definitely going to knit Blossom. It is gorgeous.
Yep.
So, the construction of Blossom. She's she's given this a rating of 3 dots, and I don't reckon it really is a 3-dot rating. I haven't knitted it yet, so I'll probably change.
Yeah.
But the reason being, just looking at it, is it's a typical yoke construction. So you knit the body in the round, you knit the sleeves in the round, you join them across the bust line, and you knit up the yoke. So what you've got is you've got panels around the hem of Intarsia. So that's more tricky, that's true, but you've only got small rose motifs, and you've got that also on the cuffs. Then you're knitting stocking stitch straight up on the arms and the body to the underarm. You would do your typical cast off for the underarm, join everything together. Then you've got about 3 rows or little stripes of a very easy basic ferrule pattern, which is easy to memorise, and you're knitting it in the round, which makes it even more easier. And then you start on the yoke, and the yoke is just possibly 5 larger rows motif Intarsia motifs, and you've clearly got the decreases on the yoke going in between the motifs, so that's not going to interfere with your picture at all. So yes, you've got to spend a bit of time fussing about on the roses up here and down here, but apart from that, it looks like an easy knit. So I think it's a great book. They're beautiful colours. I would knit almost every single one of them. The long tunic wouldn't really fit my figure, but you could change it to be shorter or whatever. But they're beautiful designs. I love them, and I'm certainly going to be knitting probably at least 2 more from this book. So if you're interested, you can go out and get it and join in the Ferrule Carl. And yeah, so...
Hi, I'm Renée. I live in Southampton in the UK, but I'm actually from the Netherlands. A couple of years ago, I really fell in love with vintage fashion, especially the fashions from the 1940s and 1930s. But I couldn't really afford to buy vintage or even vintage reproduction. So I learned how to sew so that I could make my own vintage style garments. And pretty soon after I moved to Southampton, I was still looking for a job and I had a lot of time on my hands, so I decided to learn how to knit as well. My main goal, my only goal really to learn how to knit was just so that I could make 1940s style cardigans and jumpers, which I really fell in love with. So I skipped the whole learning how to knit a scarf thing, and I went on to my very first garment, which was knitted in worsted weight yarn. It's a 1940s cardigan. I think it's got the windbreaker jacket. It's just a pattern I found online. Someone kindly scanned the original pattern book and shared the pattern. And yeah, I was completely addicted to knitting from the go. After that first cardigan, lots of vintage cardigans and jumpers followed after. Like this cabled cardigan I made from an alpaca yarn. It's actually a pattern from one of Susan Crawford's Stitch in Time books. So it's actually a 1930s pattern that she reproduced in her book. And this is my absolute favorite garment that I have knitted so far. Again, in an alpaca yarn, alpaca silk blend, lacy cardigan, which is a pattern from my collection, 1940s pattern. And I've worn that absolutely to death already. Along with the knitting obsession came the obsession to collect vintage patterns, particularly Dutch pattern books. I do collect English patterns as well. I do have English patterns, but I don't know, I guess there's just something about having patterns in your own language. I just always try to hunt them down because they are quite rare, actually. They are pretty hard to find. I mean, the Netherlands is only a small country, and of course I happen to be interested in an era where there was mostly war and shortage of paper and everything, so they are quite hard to find. One of my absolute favorites are these Knitwell book series. They were originally Swedish books that they translated to Dutch. I think the original is called Stickat. I don't really know how to pronounce the Swedish name, but they are absolutely amazing because they have these beautiful color pictures in the center that are just absolutely stunning, and the designs are pretty amazing as well. They're just so high quality. So I absolutely love these pattern books, and they're kind of like my holy grail. I have a couple, but I'm still looking for the other editions. One of my biggest knitting goals ever since I started knitting was to learn how to do stranded color work. I always was fascinated by it, but I was also really intimidated by it, I think like a lot of people. And I always thought that I had to be a pro knitter before I could do that. Intimidated me a lot more than like lace or anything else. Until last winter I decided I really wanted to knit a Christmas jumper. So I picked out a pattern and I knitted this jumper. So it's my very first strand colorwork project. It wasn't perfect, but I finally felt like, yeah, I can do this. So I went on and decided to knit a cardigan that had been on my wish list for quite a while. This is another 1940s pattern from one of my Dutch pattern books. The original is knitted flat, but after knitting the jumper, the Christmas jumper flat, I decided that I never wanted to knit stranded colorwork flat anymore. So this was actually my very first steeked project. Just knitted steeks down the center front and at the armholes, cut them open. And I did do quite a modern thing. I knitted the sleeves down from the armholes with short bows for the sleeve head shaping. But it gave me quite a lot of confidence, and I went on to knit my very first Farrell project. Genuine Farrell cardigan. Again, I was really intimidated at first because of all the colors involved. The original pattern uses 10 colors. I reduced it down to, I believe, 8 or 7. Again, originally knitted flats. I decided to knit it in the round with steeks. Finished the body, and I'm currently knitting the sleeves. I'm knitting Siamese sleeves, so I'm knitting them at the same time as one big tube with 2 steeks to separate them, so they will be cut open once they're done and seamed. Will create quite bulky seams, I think, but it seemed like the easiest way to do it. One of my dreams at the moment is that I really hope that sometime in the future I could reproduce some of the patterns from my vintage collection, especially from the Dutch pattern books, since they're quite rare and there are so many beautiful designs in there. I would really love to someday bring new life to them and maybe put out a collection in a beautiful book for other people to enjoy as well.
One girl and she's a little daisy. One girl with golden hair and a great big baby stare. One girl has got the fellows lonesome for her company. She's got a sweet little smile, a neat little style, and she belongs to me. And everyone in town loves my girl, loves my girl. She's my girl. But every day I hear some fellow say, our eyes have met, our lips not yet, but oh, you kid, I'll get you yet. And that's the reason why I worry my poor brains in our world. For if ever I should lose her, show me one man who'd refuse her, for everybody loves my girl.
I really like the way Renée got into the knitting because she wanted the clothes. She's got her
She's
particular
a girl after
style.
my heart.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But she's got her style and young and not with the money to go out and buy the things. So I love it. Just go out and make them, learn how to make it, and then make them. And jumping into the Fair Isle knitting sounds a little bit like your Intarsia. Oh, that was successful.
Yeah, although hers was successful.
Hers was successful. Straight into the Fair Isle with the purling, which I have heard is very difficult.
Yeah,
Also
isn't that amazing? So she jumped into doing Fair Isle in the flat, which meant you purled.
Yeah.
And so that should be total inspiration to any of you who want to get into Fair Isle but haven't. Take a leaf out of Renée's book and just jump in there.
Yeah, and she's got her own blog and she's on Instagram, so you can check her out there. And she's got heaps of nice stuff, and a really nice person to. I enjoyed her talking. So,
Yeah. And I hope she enjoyed the music I put with her.
Yeah.
It was such a cool little song, and I thought it really fitted her.
Yeah.
Okay, so that leads us on to talking about from the archives. So onto our from the archives section. And in tribute to Renée, I am wearing my one self-knitted, I suppose you could say, vintage garment, or vintage style or inspired. So it's sort of a glamorous 1950s number. It's a gorgeous little design. It sort of nips in at the waist. You've got these decorative buttons down the front. So this section panel here is in moss stitch, which is knit one, purl one, and then the opposite in the opposite place on the second row. And that goes up to a nice sort of band around the back, so it has a really lovely feminine collar. And there's a little bit of shaping here. These are very simple, lace panels, and you've got a bit of an increase under here, and you continue with the moss stitch over the shoulders. And yeah, I love it. It's cute and glamorous, I think.
It is cute.
Good, thank you. So I thought I'd get it out and wear it in tribute to Renée and our next guest, which you will meet, who will be James Norbury. So I want to tell you a little bit about him. So first of all, I thought after Renée gave me her footage, I would just look into vintage clothes a little bit, and the two opposite camps, which I think are wonderful extremes of knitting, of seamed and knitted in the flat garments versus knitted in the round. And you could almost say that we have James Norbury in this camp and Elizabeth Zimmerman in this camp, and I think both of them have made the whole world of knitting a wonderful place together. And without one of them, it would be unbalanced, I think. So the garments of the 40s and the 50s were typically very fitted and very feminine, and they were knitted in the flat and seamed. And I think that was because a lot of them were very tailored looking, and there was a lot of stylized shaping. Often you had flouncy sleeves or puffed sleeves, very tailored around the bust line and the waistline and the shoulders, sometimes with neat little collars, even frills or big pussy bows. And all of these things had to be added, sort of sewn in pieces and added on, just like you would if you were doing, so you knit the sewing fabric and then you sew it together. And I think all of that could actually be achieved much easier by knitting in pieces and sewing in the flat. And so James Norbury, who I only found out about relatively recently, and I have ordered one of his books, which is no longer being published, but I found a used copy, and it is not here for this podcast, but I will show it when it does arrive. It's due to come in a couple of weeks. So that should be really exciting and interesting. But he was born in 1904 and lived to 1972. So 2 years after I was born, he died. And he is considered to be the strongest single influence on British knitting during the 25 years directly after the Second World War. So he was Peyton's and Baldwin's chief pattern designer. So he was a knitwear designer, but he also wrote a lot of knitting books which supported his BBC television knitting show. Could you imagine? Wouldn't it be great if the BBC had a knitting show now? Wouldn't that be so cool?
Well, they could bring that one out again. From the archives. That'd be cool.
That would be so cool. BBC, you've got to do it. It's a little bit like Arnie and Carlos.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was actually thinking of Arne and Carlos. I don't know if everyone write this down. Don't jump away from our show right now, but write down Arne and Carlos. Arne and Carlos are this Norwegian couple, and they're absolutely hilarious. And I do, as I'm sitting here with my 4 needles, Arne is the real knitter between the pair, I think. And he grabs these. He looks like he's sitting there with about 8 needles altogether, and he'll explain to you, he'll do a tutorial, and in 2 minutes he'll explain how to make a pair of gloves or something like that.
No.
And he grabs another needle, and then another needle goes in here, and then you explain it, and then you've got your glove.
And there it is.
Yeah.
Easy, simple.
And they're always sitting out in some beautiful spot in their Norwegian home.
So don't leave our podcast now, but definitely check them out later.
It's a funny thing to think about.
I'll have to do a lot of editing if you keep talking.
If these people back then were here now, where you could just do a podcast or put up your Instagram feed.
Do an interview. I would love to interview.
Just imagine having James Norbury on, what's it called? Here or on Periscope, right? He does this little, here's James Norbury live. This is my thoughts. I think it'd be absolutely hilarious.
Absolutely.
So
he was extremely passionate about his knitting, and he was extremely knowledgeable about knitting, and he was a bit of a knitting history buff. He was also has been described as a little bit loopy and dictatorial. And I want to say a few things in his defence, because I think he probably was just a man influenced by his time and culture. So he had very strong ways of rules of what was the correct way and incorrect way of knitting. For example, he would say that your needles have to be 13 inches long and one of them is tucked under the arm, and the left needle should be doing all of the work. So he had these very strict rules, but thinking about it, he actually went to the Shetland Islands, and he was very much influenced and very much admired some of these very early, when I say early, they're not early, but early 20th century Shetland lace knitters. And I think what he did, he wrote down a lot of their designs, and he talked about them in raving terms. And I think he probably went there, saw how they knitted, saw how fluent it was and effective it was, and was probably trying to bring that knowledge and that technique to the average English housewife knitter. And I can see that there's a lot of good in that, because knitting can be, it's true, you can do it however you want, whatever style you want, and as long as you're enjoying yourself. But if you do want to, you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you learn something. So I find that if I'm going to learn something, I usually try to find the experts on it and see what they have to say, because they've been there and done there and refined down really effective ways of doing things. And I am assuming that his motivation was to bring this technique of this great knitting that he would have seen and said, this is a good way of doing it. Learn this technique and you'll be very effective and efficient. That's my idea on what he was doing. And of course he knitted in pieces, and was very strong about that, but he has brilliant shaping, and you could probably learn a lot if you're a designer and you want to do fitted garments from looking at how he shapes sleeve caps and shapes different things. And again, like I said about the fashion in the 30s, 40s, early 50s, very tight fitting, very lots of added bits and frills and bows and attachments. So that kind of seamed flat knitting is perfect for that. And I think he unfortunately gets compared to Elizabeth Zimmermann, who came along, I think, about a decade later. And she is also a brilliant knitter, great for the knitting world, but she's a product of her time as well, in the sense that she came out in the 60s and she was riding on the back of the motorcycle of her husband, knitting away and throwing all the rules of knitting to the wind and saying you can knit how you want in whatever way you want. And that's such the freeing mentality of the 60s. And the clothes changed too. People were burning their bras. There weren't sort of sweet, very feminine things. It was a loose fitting, the lopey jumpers, which were unisex clothing, was coming in. And for looser garments, this knitting in the round, this traditional knitting in the round and tube, we've got a tube for the trunk of our bodies and a tube for our body, for our arms. That works brilliantly for that style. And I think he unfortunately just gets compared with his strong rules to Elizabeth's be free in your knitting, and he gets a bad rap. But if you listen to all of the early films and TV reporters of the 40s and the 50s, they all speak very crisp and fluent and authoritarian, so it's kind of just a product of the time. But you now can form your own opinion of James Norbury because you're about to meet him.
Yeah, we have got some television. And this is actually from an American television game show from... Do we know when it was? Yeah, we do. 1967. This program was aired, which is about 5 years, I see, before James Norbury died at 64. So
Did he
68.
die at 68?
68, yeah, okay. And this show is really funny. It's, in a way, I think it's a bit of a shame, but you've got 4 celebrities, all right? So it's a game show. You've got 4 personalities as the sort of judges. And then you have your special guest, but you also have 2 other people. The guest is always somebody who's done something extraordinary or...
unusual.
Unusual, yeah. Okay, so James Norbury as a knitter, a male who's the head designer for a knitting company, is a candidate for that. But then you have 2 other people, and the idea of the game show is that the 3 guests all have to pretend to be this special person, because this person is not so well known. The 4 celebrities who are on the judging panel have to figure out who's lying and who's telling the truth. So the
which
program
ones are imposters?
Yeah, who are the imposters and who's the real one. So it's called To Tell the Truth. I'm not sure if any of our viewers have seen this show. It was just before our time, but maybe somebody has. It's pretty funny. It's a little bit... You'd get to see a little bit of the character who's there, and you find out a little bit about them, but it's a little bit unfortunate you don't actually drill them and get a whole lot of information about this person.
But it's interesting to meet him. So we'll see you at the end, yeah?
Yeah, this is really, really a fun bit of TV, so we'll see you in a moment.
And now let's meet our 3rd team of challengers. What is your name, please?
My name is James Norbury.
My name is James Norbury.
My name is James Norbury.
Follow along again, if you will, with your copies of this one. I, James Norbury, am an expert in the art of hand knitting. For 7 years, I taught knitting on British television. I have written 10 books on the subject, including the authoritative Encyclopedia of Knitting. I am also chief designer for the world's largest firm of wool spinners. Here is one of my designs. This is Gail Sheldon wearing a mocha knitted playsuit. It features a crew neck with diamond motif and little boy shorts. This is June Ferguson wearing my marine blue at-home ensemble with a crochet-accented button front tunic over knee-length bloomers. I am an accomplished knitter myself. As a matter of fact, in cable-stitch circles, I am known as the Dior of the knitting needles. Signed, James Norbury. Very well, panel. These three gentlemen all claim to be one James Norbury. We'll start with Peggy Cass. Peggy?
Thank you. Number 3, do you cast on by hand or by needle?
I cast on by hand.
Thank you. Number 2, what is the difference between knit and purl?
Knitting is done with the wool at the front of the work and purling with wool at the back of the work.
Thank you. Number 1, how much wool to a skein?
Oh, about 1 ounce.
Thank you. Number 2, were you to knit a skirt, would you do it on 2 straight needles or 1 long round needle?
I should do it on 2 straight needles.
Oh, I do it on 1 round needle.
Orson B.
My great-aunt used to knit profiles of Conrad Nagel on wrappers. Number 2, do you ever do any pictures or just designs like that?
I just design.
Just design, well, that's a pity. Number 3, who is Madame Lafarge?
Madame Lafarge
Yeah.
is a designer in Paris.
Designer? In Paris. I guess she is, yes. Number 1, how long was your show on in England?
Approximately 7 years.
You had a big following, did you? People tuned in next week to see how it came out or what?
I really wouldn't know. I think so, yes.
Yes? Well, number 2, did you give instructions? Oh, the time went like
Kitty
wild.
Carlisle.
Number 3, it says here you're a champion knitter. Do you ever knit, like in public, for instance, if you're on an airplane or something to pass the time? And what do the people think when they see you doing it?
Well, I don't care what they think, but if they ask me questions about it, I tell them the truth, that men were the first knitters. The shepherds were knitters, and they used to knit their hats.
Well, good for you. I approve of that. Number 1, do you agree with that when you purl, the thread is in the back of the needle?
Yes, I agree with that.
You do. Number 3, what is the largest woman's magazine dedicated to knitting in England?
A woman's own.
Number 2, what is the women's home industries?
Tom Poston.
Number 2, do you ever help out factories with their knitting?
No.
Well, number 1, do you?
No, never.
Pardon me?
Never.
Number 3, may I ask you, as an individual knitter, would factories be able to turn out either one of these garments?
No, they wouldn't. I actually have no competition at all. I work for the largest wool spinners in the world. They are in Darlington, Yorkshire. The name is Peyton and Baldwin.
And that's all the time we have.
Much
time
more
for you now to knit 1 and purl 2 with your reasons and your votes. So mark your ballots at once. No change and no consultation. And of course, again, while you're voting, panel, our studio audience will be asked to vote as well. So again, when I say vote, will you select button number 1, number 2, or number 3? Are you ready? Vote! Again, your votes have been registered. Let's find out once more how our panelists voted. Tom, how did you vote?
Bud, for the last time, on to tell the truth, I'm retiring my crayon. I voted for number 2. I thought he was just a little truculent, as a man might be who thought we were going to make fun of his avocation and profession. So I voted for him.
Peggy.
As I cast off the last stitch in my sweater, I want to tell you, I voted for number 2 because he never looked up. He kept looking down. You know, when you knit, you look down. And
Orson B.
And with a lump in my throat, and I'll see him tomorrow at 3 o'clock. I voted for number 3 because to me he had the gift of gab, he had a sense of humor, he worked in a plug for his company. All 3 things indicate a touch of show business, and I don't think you could sit on TV and just knit and keep anyone watching it.
And your poor 3 is raveling.
It's unraveling a little.
What a shame.
Yes, this suit itself is so threadbare that I sent it to be cleaned. They returned it on a spool.
Kitty Carlisle.
I voted for number 3 because I think 1 and 2 gave us the wrong answers on the purling. And number 3 said that men should knit, and I think it's good therapy, and there's no reason why they shouldn't knit.
Oh, yeah.
Very well, let's find out who got the most votes from our studio audience. Our audience voted for number 3. So, let's learn now which of these gentlemen, in truth, is James Norbury. Will the real James Norbury please stand up? Very good. Number 1, what is your real name and what do you really do?
My name is John Hogg, and I'm the Chief Accountant for United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF.
Number 3, what is your real name and what do you do?
My name is Roy Dexter, and I am an expert in the art of yoga.
Thank you. In taking the score, we find that there were 1 and 2 incorrect votes from our panelists and 1 incorrect vote from our studio audience for a total of $750, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Good night. God bless you.
All right, we're back. I hope you enjoyed that. I thought it was really funny.
Andrew wants me to knit the little boy shorts.
Yeah, the play suit I thought was also great. Yeah.
Or I like the crocheted bloomers underneath.
That was a different outfit. But
amazing.
Yeah, I love the guy who says he's a bit of a showman. You have to be a showman to you can't have a bloke sitting there knitting for an hour on a TV show. That would be. So that was cool. And
he reminded me of Simon Cowell from Britain's Got Talent. He's always saying the politically incorrect or rude comment.
Yeah. And then there's the woman who's sort of the politically hypercorrect or...
Oh, the moralistic one, Lady Kyle.
Yeah, who thinks it's a good thing for men to be knitting. I think it's a good thing for men to be knitting too. It's a stress relief, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we thought that was so hilarious, and I hope you really enjoyed it as well.
So, Andrea, tell us about Italy.
Yes, so last week I was really worried about the content of this video because I've been away for a week. So I've been madly planning things for you today in the last couple of days. And Madeline and I, poor Andrew had to stay at home, but Madeline and I had the wonderful opportunity to go to the island of Ischia, which is just off Naples in Italy, for a family wedding. So one of my cousins, a lovely Australian girl, has married a very handsome and charming Italian man. And we had the privilege to attend the wedding. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful area. So I've got a 1-minute clip of our adventure, Madeline and I's adventure. And the accompanying music is by the Nepalese man himself, greatest tenor of all times, Enrico Caruso, singing O Sole Mio. And O Sole Mio, you will all recognize, I'm sure of it, if you don't already recognize the title. And it's, what a beautiful sunny day it is. That's the theme. And it's perfectly appropriate for Ischia.
It was a beautiful sunny day, wasn't it?
It was wonderful. So enjoy this little bit of fun, and we'll see you very quickly at the end. We're back.
So that was our show for today. We hope you enjoyed it. Please do subscribe to the channel if you do that. And I know some people don't subscribe to YouTube channels. That's okay, but if you do, click the button. Make sure you catch our next episode. We have changed our show notes a little bit. We are not putting everything in the YouTube notes. If you want to see all the details about everything that we talk about, you can go to fruityknitting.com. Andrea is on Instagram as Fruity Knitting, and we're on Ravelry as Fruity Knitting, and I think that's the most important things. So, thank you very much for watching. We'll be back in 2 weeks.